Live. Let me pull up my monitor.
Cool.
Just to make sure on my end. Hi, everybody. You might notice Blake is not sitting with me today, but I have a special guest here.
Hello.
This is Barry Kirby.
Hi, Nick. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. Thank you for filling in for Blake tonight.
No problem.
I know it's late. What's that?
They're big shoes to fill, but hopefully we'll be able to do him justice. So
it's really late for you, so thank you for being on. And everyone should send Barry a huge thank you for staying up late with us tonight.
So technically, it's not late now; it's early.
Well,
it's just gone midnight. So I've already I put the a message out on LinkedIn that obviously I was going to be on the show. I've already had one human factors colleague message me to make sure that I'm not doing any safety critical tasks tomorrow because I don't want to put myself at risk of human factors damage. I was like, that I think he was trying to be sarcastic, but I think it's nice that we have a caring community.
It is, right? I mean, that's keep those types of friends close. The ones that won't let you operate heavy machinery after podcasting late at night, right?
Quite, yes.
All right. So, yes, we are live on my end. I do see it over here. So, Barry, you and I tonight are going to be talking about these mental maps and problem solving. So I figured you and I go over the show notes like Blake and I normally do, make sure kind of everything's in its place and we got our heads on straight, and then we'll probably get recording here in about 25 or so minutes.
Awesome. Yep.
So let's see here. This is from UC Davis. This is one that we wanted to cover last week. And for anyone watching, I may have some internet issues again. I was telling Barry before, I had a technician come out last Friday after last Thursday's snafu. And everything was working fine up until an hour ago, and so we'll kind of see how it goes.
Maybe there's something in there's another Human Factors podcast out there that's thinking that you're competition and have come and damaged your or come and sabotaging your internet lines.
They're right outside, just slashing the lines, making sure we can't get out there. Oh man.
But no, I'm sure.
Yeah, so let's see here. This story, let's just recap really quick, right? So the story is from UC Davis. It's a new model showing novel problems using mental map. I think we have that blurb good to go, and I think we have some good intel there. I think we talked just a little bit about this before we went live. That's okay. We can... Yeah,
that's good. No, I think certainly the mental models bit, and that thing between the mental model and cognitive model are effectively same thing, but then maps, the difference between a model and a map, I think.
Yeah.
Key.
Yeah, we have those in there. I don't know. We had one social thought, I think, across both weeks, which is not the response I was hoping for, but it's a tough one. It's like, okay. I forget what the question even was. It was something like, and I retweeted it this morning too. I got to look. Bad me. I should have had this prepped. That's what this is for, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing.
Let's see. We got... All right. So it's what methods do you use to make better decisions? We got one comment actually from Louis Chuang, who is one of the co-chairs of Neuroergonomics Conference, which was a ton of fun, and we have our conference recap out now. That was fun to put together, getting a lot of different opinions on the event. You kind of showed up briefly there. What did you think of it?
It was I thought it was interesting. The platform was, it was really good. We got to meet up and have a chat. So I thought from that networking perspective, it offered something definitely different from the past 18 months of online conferences that we've had. And some of the topics were, it's the first Neuroergonomics conference I've been to. And so I was able to drop in on that last day when they offered it for free, which was brilliant. And there was some real good stuff around there was the leadership one I listened to in particular was that she offered some really different insights that I hadn't really thought of before. So yeah, that was fab. And that's one of the, I think, the positives to have come out a lot of this with the pandemic, and it's really forced people to do things differently. And whilst we haven't had the ability to meet up, we've been able to share events a lot wider than we ever would have, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of good things that, especially like as it comes to remote work, right? I think a lot of people are coming to realize that they can do their jobs 100% from at home, and I think that's great, right? Because it reduces the amount of traffic on the road. It reduces, it kind of democratizes the office space in a way where you don't necessarily need to be in the same space as others to be productive.
Yeah, I think it's really thrown the idea of flexible working right out there, where everybody said that, you can't do this, you can't do this. Well, we've just proven for the last 18 months that on the whole we can. Though I will admit I've had some struggles. We were meant to do a whole lot of usability testing and design testing, designing of a platform I was working on, and it was one of these sort of things that you couldn't just do anywhere because of security implications. And so that gave us a massive challenge, just because the software available to our client and things like this. But we got over it. You work a bit and we come up with processes and things like that. But it just means that you have to work a bit differently. And also, I haven't been at home so much as I have over the past 18 months. My family remembered who I am, which has been novel. Which all changes this week because I'm back out on the road again, and people have suddenly realised that you can have face-to-face meetings again here in the UK, and so the next 2 weeks, my diary is now interesting. But we shall see.
Yeah, I definitely enjoy the ability to like hop off of a meeting and go over and give my son a hug, like in between my day. Or when I'm stressed out, just kind of take a break and like sit on the couch and watch something, take a break, a little mind break, and then come right back to it.
Take a break in your own space.
Yeah, exactly. In a space that's comfortable and relaxing, and it's not like, I'm in the break room just waiting for Barb to show up and say, "How are you doing?" and not really wanting to talk,
Yeah. I don't care, Bob. Go away.
I don't really know anybody named Barb. I don't know anybody named Barb, but I will say Barb is kind of like my code word. So I have these nosy neighbors that are just across the way, and they always look into our space. And I call them both Barb. I call them both Barb. Barb 1 and Barb 2. And they're so nosy. And so that's kind of my... Not even, it's a endearing derogatory term for aging ladies that want to poke their head into spaces where they shouldn't be. I don't know.
Do you give them the cheeky wave out the window when they're looking, or do you just mutter under your breath the fact that?
No, we do the stare. We do this.
Oh, okay. Or the intimidating stare.
Yeah, Are you really gonna?
Who backs down first?
Oh, it's a game of chicken, and I think they always do, right? Because they're out there walking their dogs, and so.
Oh, yeah. Okay, fair enough. I think that's a dimension, a social dimension of the difference between the American psyche and the British psyche, is because we'd be too polite and we'd want to. Oh no, we can't look too much. We'd have to look away first. So,
yeah, I don't know. I will say my wife is a little bit.
That's probably a whole podcast.
My wife is definitely one of the ones that stares a little longer than I do. I kind of just like glance over them and, are you looking over here? Okay, well. Neighbors. Yes. All right. I do want to. So we picked out some stories, or not stories, some It Came Froms last week for Blake and I to talk about. But since you're on the show, I want to make sure we talk about stuff that you want to talk about, because you got
I'm not Blake.
You are not Blake. Yeah, let's say a differing perspective and opinion than someone like Blake might have. And let's see here. I did set up a bot in our Discord. It's working out pretty well. Let's see. So I know you had identified one as a potential talking point. Did you want to talk about that slide deck or portfolio case study presentation? It's hi everyone. I have an interview as a junior position coming up where I'll need to present one of my case studies. Want to gauge the community's feeling about presenting the case study. Best approach: slide deck or straight from the website.
Yeah, because I'm just reading the ones that you got in the show notes as well. Actually, these ones are, I think the ones you got in show notes are pretty good as well.
Yeah, I did have another one that I wanted to bring up here. Let's go ahead and paste that. Ooh, I have to figure something out about the formatting there. Is there a way to merge formatting? Anyway, we'll just paste it for now and adjust.
Well, that'd be a good one. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. So the one we're talking about for everyone listening is how did you prepare to make a jump from a junior role to a mid-level role?
There's quite a few of these that it's so hard not to just go for. Well, it depends.
Yeah.
So,
we need. I keep telling Blake we need an "it depends" soundbite to like just play. You know, like a "it depends" button.
You need it on a button. Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. Along with a klaxon, just to show that you're show that it's coming in. Yeah. It's coming. I quite like I thought it was interesting, the categorical differences in job roles.
Okay. Yeah, I do like that one too, and I think that one is a good. So let's go ahead and bring that one up. So what I'll do is I'll just paste it there for us. I'll make a little line. We usually try to go for 3 of these or so. Cool. We may or may not get to all of them, but 3 is typically a good number that kind of fills that time. We'll do that one. I'm looking through the bot right now to see if there's anything else I want to pull in. There's one in here I think I'm going to pull. I don't know if I want to talk about it today, just because it's a heavy topic, and it's about VR and AR in the future of like where to focus in the future.
Oh yeah, I see that. So the shifting career one,
right?
Yeah. See, that is really tough. Yeah, you're right. That is a really deep topic because it's so there that it's just not quite a full-on career in itself, but we're like right on that brink of it being the pretty much the only thing that is going to be out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have some thoughts on that one. I think it is a deeper one that I'd want to prepare a little bit for. So
I maybe not. You agree? This one about the where one stakeholder holds most of the weight. That's quite good because from my perspective, because I do most of my work with the military, that's quite a common situation. So
which one is that one? The stakeholder.
The odd situation where the feedback of one stakeholder holds most of the weight.
Yeah, let's bring that one up. Yeah, I think I've also worked in defense and know that that side of things.
It's because he brings in so much cultural stuff as well, which is quite a neat thing to play with. I guess generally just that how to break into the field of HF, but that's such a broad decision, isn't it? Because there's so many ways in.
I think we selected it because it's talking about the CAD background here, and that's a little different from something else that we've heard. And we talk about it. I mean, we've talked about that question before. I'd like to get something a little different, I think. I do like this next one about building a design team, or even building a research team, like what it means to start team building, right? Or even
team building as a whole is just so is such a useful thing to be able to do and to have the right attitude to it.
Right.
So cool. I like
All
that.
right, let's pull that one in. All right, so it sounds like we got our came froms this week.
Keep us going.
And then you have your one more thing. I have my one more thing. Have you seen any of either of these? I will say.
No, so I'm looking forward to hearing about it.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. It's pretty good. I don't know. Are you a huge horror buff, or you watch any horror stuff, or?
Not really. I've got to be honest. The some of the stuff that I've seen in the past, yeah, I'm just not a fan of being scared witless.
Sure.
It's not high on my list of things that I really get excited by. I don't know. I've sort of seen some things, but you know that whole tension piece just before you know it's coming, and all that, and then it happens, and you just know that it's done. And most people get the thrill out of that. By the sounds of it, you're one of these type of people who really likes that sort of thing.
Well, but this could be different. This is a different conversation than my one more thing. So I will say I am very selective with my horror. I'm very much into like the cerebral kind of philosophical horror, if you want to call it that, right?
Yeah. Okay.
It's more like like the slasher films or gore movies or anything like that. I respect them. I understand why people like them, but for me, it's the like fear. It's the fear piece for me, right? Where to watch people in these certain situations, and it has to be done correctly, because as I'm sure you get it too, right? As someone who studies psychology, it's like you understand that people have certain reactions in certain situations, and so running up the stairs when somebody's at the front door is not the
yes.
Like, why would you do that? You would run away towards the back door, or So I think movies and television shows that handle characters with care are something that I really enjoy, and I almost enjoy like horror as a subgenre of other stories. And these ones that I'm talking about here are they have literally haunting in the title, and it's a ghost story, but at the same time it can be more metaphorical.
It's more intelligent horror.
Yeah, that's how
yeah.
I
I see. I'm more of you. I like zombie films and that type of thing. I'm quite happy with that sort of thing. So blood, gore, yeah, I'm happy with that. Just that whole, I guess, the suspense thing. Is yes.
Like knowing there's a ghost in the room with you, but you can't see it yet. It's coming.
Which is not helpful for me at the moment, because I'm sat at the end of my garden in the middle of the night. It's gone midnight. It's pitch black outside. So now that you've said that, I'm looking out the window going, I can't see anything, and I'm almost terrified that something's now going to... If one of my kids is listening to this and then they're going to creep down the garden, then I'm in trouble.
Oh, your lights keep flickering there. I don't know if that... I know we talked about that earlier.
That's just me not being able to get a grip of my own smart lighting.
This might freak you out a little bit, but so in these, so I'm talking about Haunting of Hill House and Bly Manor tonight for my one more thing, and in those shows, the director has cleverly inserted a ghost in the background of almost every scene.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So like as you're watching, you might see a ghost like just standing in the background, not necessarily doing anything, but it's like creepy when you go, oh my gosh, it's right there. Like there was a moment in the second show, Bly Manor, where someone was in a classroom and it looked like there was an army man over her shoulder, and then I was like, oh, that's an interesting poster. And then the shot continued, it kept going back and forth between the characters. I didn't see the poster. I was like, oh, that was a ghost. It's just those little like mind things that go on. It's like
subtle but effective.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Nice.
Oh man. How you doing? It's late. You still doing okay?
But yeah, I'm still awake. It's my wife was very keen that I should have maybe taken a nap this afternoon. Finish my meeting, because I had some big presentations to do today as well. So I was doing that this morning. And she was, oh, you need to have a sleep. You need to have sleep before you come and do this. And I was like, well, if I go to sleep, I won't wake up again. So, or at least if I do, I'll just feel awful. So I was like, no, we just got to power through. It'll be fine. But if I do fall asleep halfway through, you'll need to give me a metaphorical nudge.
I for sure will. I will say, Barry.
What could possibly go wrong?
Wake up, man.
It'd be really bad if when I'm reading and talking my piece out, if I put myself to sleep, that would be bad. So let's try not to do that.
Might offend the authors of that paper too. So be careful.
They've used big enough words that there's no way you're going to fall asleep to them. So, yes, reading the original paper is certainly exercised the ability to pronounce things.
Yeah, I talked about it on our our hangout, I guess, last week, where we weren't sure if the internet connection was going to be as effective, and we're talking about a paper called oh shoot, I'm going to bring it up again. It's
so you should put it up. I like that. Yes, last week.
Erudite vernacular. Consequences of erudite vernacular utilized irrespective of necessity. Problems with using long words needlessly. That's the title of the article.
Yeah.
Oppenheimer, 2006. So good.
And so true.
Really, like here I get on my soapbox again. It's all about that communication piece. I think part of my personal thought, and maybe you'll get your thoughts on this, is like my personal opinion is that human factors hasn't broken through like UX has, because the terms are too complicated, and people, academics specifically, choose to use needlessly nitpicky words to communicate their findings. I understand why they do it, but at the same time, it's like they need to. I feel like science as a whole, not just human factors, but science as a whole needs to work on communication to ensure that media outlets and others don't take those findings and misconstrue them or misrepresent what exactly they're trying to say. Because when you do use long words like this, where you might have somebody who doesn't quite understand the domain, let's put it that way, might come away with some conclusions that are not quite true.
I absolutely agree. I think we have a major problem in the human factors world that nobody's come up with a pithy definition that we can easily say what is human factors in a nice, short, easy sentence that everybody understands. The fact that we have lots of conferences, and part of the discussion is, well, what is human factors? What are the boundaries of it, and this, that, and the other, doesn't do ourselves any favors. And then, yes, we spend a lot of time almost trying to jealously guard the boundaries of what we think our domain is, when actually we should possibly be reaching out more and doing that type of thing. Which is why you started off doing your podcast and doing this type of thing, and we need to do more of this type of thing to bring people along for the ride, because we desperately need it.
I agree. Okay, we have a couple minutes here before we actually start the show. We're going to be starting at 4:30 Pacific tonight, or I guess is it 1:30 for you, or is it?
It's 12:30.
12:30.
Yeah. I've actually have to put in my phone now both Pacific time and English time, just to know what sort of differences that you're talking about.
Yeah, it's odd, right?
I'll try to work out, are you behind us or in front of us? But you're behind us. So we're good.
We're towards the tail end of the day. So you are in the future. How is the 24th treating you?
Yeah, it's great. It's weather's nice. It's not raining, which actually, because I live in Wales, it normally rains. So yeah, it's great.
It's good to hear. I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
How was yesterday? How you still enjoying
yesterday's all right. Yesterday It's interesting because I don't know what's going to happen over the next 6 hours, 8 hours, and you do. That's
Yes. It's
time is silly.
we used to describe it as my in-laws used to live over in the States, over in around by St. Louis, and so we used to describe it as they live a meal behind.
Yeah.
Which is the easiest way we could visualize it. So,
I forget. Wasn't there's like some proposal for like a universal time, right? And I think the closest thing we have is like Zulu.
Yeah.
And it would just make sense, right? Like over time, it might be a shakeup at the beginning, but over time, it would just make sense, right? Instead of having dinner at, 1800, depending on where you're at in the world, it might be 0300, but it would still be,
you're right.
Dinner.
It should should be an abstract concept.
Right.
We constantly have these, with daylight savings time and things like that. Is you just don't need that anymore because we've now got that understanding that actually people just go and do what they need to do when they need to do it.
Right.
And time is now basically it's just a number. It's just because we want to align. If I'm talking about lunchtime, then that when you're talking about lunchtime, that's 12 o'clock. But actually, we just we should be able to abstract away from that now.
Yeah, it's really funny leading the lab. So and in my day job, right? So I have people that I work with on the East Coast, so that's 3 hours separated from me. And then I have the lab, so I have you in the UK, and then I have Matteo in Australia. And so I have to like have this worldwide understanding of when things fall.
Yeah, that's mad. It's
given me greater perspective on the world, though, which is interesting. I didn't think I'd have that from just trying to organize meetings and get-togethers through virtual means, and even with the conference that was in Germany time, Central European time, so it was time zones.
Yeah, see, I had no excuse for not being able to do that because obviously it's in my time zone, so or near as. So yes, I had less of an excuse there, except for weirdly, I'd have preferred it to be a lot different because then I could do my day job and then go to the conference. That would have been much easier. So consequently, I just had it on in the background. So,
all right. Well, it's 30 after. You ready to do this thing?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, I am recording on my end. Are you good to go for recording?
Yeah, I'm there. We are go.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and play the intro, and then we'll go ahead and get into it. All right. We'll be right back after this.
Welcome to Human Factors Cast, your weekly podcast for human factors, psychology, and design.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It is episode 219. We're recording this live on September 23rd for me and September 24th for our special guest. And this is Human Factors Cast. I'm your host, Nick Roome, and I am joined today by the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Barry Kirby.
Thank you very much, and it's great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
So, Barry, you're the host of 1202, the Human Factors podcast. So this is what we'd like to consider the greatest crossover of all time. How are you doing?
I'm really well. Yes, as when podcasts collide, this is amazing. I think it's fantastic the fact that yes, we're doing podcasts in the same domain, but actually we can come together just like good human factors practitioners should, for the greater good. So no, I'm great. It's apart from the fact it's it's early for me because it's just gone midnight. So I've you could say I've stayed up later. I've just got up really early, one way or the other, but.
Well, we're so glad to have you here tonight. You're filling in for Mr. Blake Arnsdorf. We got a great show for you all tonight. We're going to be talking about a new model for mental maps and how you can use it to approach solving some of these novel problems. But first, I do want to go over some quick programming notes. our coverage of the Neuroergonomics Conference recap. That is out now. We released that a little bit earlier today, so it's a good chance to hear from a couple members of our lab about their experience at the event. And I also talked to Louis Chuang, one of the co-chairs of the event, to get a little bit more insight from behind the scenes. So please go listen to that if you haven't already. And with that, I think it's time we get into the part of the show we like to call Human Factors News. This is the part of the show where we talk about human factors news. Let's talk about everything related to the field of human factors. Barry, what's the story this week?
Well, this week we're going to be talking about the new model for solving novel problems using mental maps. So how do we make decisions about a situation we've not encountered before? New work from the Center of Mind and Brain, that is a fabulous department name, at the University of California, Davis, shows that we can solve abstract problems in the same way that we can find a novel route between two known locations. And that's by using an internal cognitive map. So humans and animals have a great ability to solve novel problems by generalizing from existing knowledge and inferring new solutions from limited data. This is much harder to achieve with artificial intelligence because animals, including us as humans, navigate by creating a representative map of the outside world in their head as they move around. Once we know that two locations are close to each other, we can then infer or have a really good idea that there's a shortcut between them, even if we've never even been there. These maps make use of a network of grid cells and place cells in parts of the brain. This new work takes the research further by testing to see if people can actually use such maps to find answers to novel problems. Personally, I guess navigation of where you've never been before is a novel problem in of itself. But what do you think?
So I think generally this makes sense. I think in my everyday life, or when I'm, let me just say when I'm like visiting a new location, right? It's a novel situation. I'm in a new location. I might see two different landmarks, and I might say, "Oh, I recognize that other landmark." And if I can see both of them from the same spot, it's easy to say, "Okay, well, there might be a shortcut between the two." But I to me, this tracks, right? I will say this story made me go back and kind of brush up on some of the mental maps and mental models and what it all means. And we'll get into that in a minute. But I do want to ask you about your kind of general thoughts about this article and what you thought.
Yeah, I was kind of with that right from the beginning. I was like, well, why don't we know this already? Isn't this just the way that life works? But then it is actually one of these things that I think we take for granted because that's the way we think, then yes, doesn't everybody know this? But actually what I found really interesting is that nobody's ever been able to prove this yet. And this is the first time that they've been able to prove that using that method to navigate is the way that we actually can use it to deal with novel problems themselves. So it was a bit of a, well, duh. But actually the science of it is really quite interesting.
Yeah, and basically, the bottom line here is that they're suggesting that there's this mechanism in our brain that's kind of generalizable from the from the like mental mapping piece of it to the decision making piece of it, right? I do want to jump into sort of a brush up, if you will, on what mental models are, cognitive maps, mind maps. What are all these things, right? Because there's a lot of terminology here. And I want to make sure we get it straight before we start talking about it. So mental models, it's kind of our way of understanding what's going on in the world, right? It's what's happening in our head. It kind of shapes how we think. It shapes how we understand things. It also kind of looks at these connections or opportunities that we see. What is a mental model to you, Barry?
Yeah, so for me, a mental model is sitting there and being able to almost generalize what's going on and being able to use a reductionized, well, it is a mapping in a way, but of being able to just understand how you take the analogy of what's going on out there and store it in your mind. I think it's interesting that we do mix and match the cognitive and mental quite a lot. So effectively they're synonymous with this. So, but fundamentally having that that mental model is just a representation of how you store it in your brain and how you see things. a really interesting an aside to this that's really interesting is when we have incorrect mental models, or because the fact that we make our own mental models, everybody's mental model is individual. So we've got, when we're relying on people using their mental models, then we've got to make sure that they can construct them in the right way. But that's probably going off tangent to a certain extent. How do you think that differs from a map or a cognitive map?
So we did the research. This is not my thoughts.
Off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, I would say that cognitive maps are the umbrella term for all visual represent. So let's actually break this down, right? So you have the mental models, which is this internal representation going on, and you have these cognitive maps, which are kind of the external portrayal of what's going on of the mental model itself. So I guess one way to think about it is that mental models are in your mind and cognitive maps are what happens in the environment. And that's as simple as I can put it. We can break them down a little bit more, but is that kind of what it means to you too?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The mental of the modeling bit is the internal. It's how you do things, and then the mapping of it is how you can then lay that out or see it out there, and largely in order to communicate to other people. So, mind mapping, any of them sort of exercises where you're trying to communicate your thinking to somebody else's, that's all mapping things out. But it is really interesting because language when we talk about at this point is so key. Because it's no wonder that we can get ourselves confused by it when we start to use terms interchangeably when they really shouldn't. We should be clear delineators between the two.
Yeah, so I want to get back to the study that we're talking about. Now that we kind of identified the differences here, this is straight from the abstract here, but they're basically saying that cognitive maps of an environment, so again, this externalized representation of the internal mechanisms going on, right, can theoretically allow for flexibility. And what I'm understanding is that there's kind of a spillover between the two. They might use them interchangeably in this, but I think it makes sense, right? When you have that external representation, there might be flexibility in that as you're approaching some of these novel situations. You might have like an external representation might, if you take the navigation test, you might have one or more routes, and that would allow you flexibility for how to navigate between those 2 points. I think they're talking about cognitive maps kind of being stored in the hippocampus and brain parts, right? And we can talk about brain parts. That's fine. I like to focus on the applied aspect of this. Like, what does it actually mean? Is there anything else that you want to take out of that?
Yeah, I think we stay away from the names of the various bits of the brain because some of them are really long. But fundamentally, I think for me, it was really interesting the fact that they're looking at with the experimentation, they're taking that idea of the journey and working out your navigation, and they're putting it, the novel task that what they're putting it to was, and again taking this straight from their paper, they were given them a number of entrepreneurs, and they give them scores of competence and popularity. But then when they asked the 16 people I had as the volunteers, they were asking them to rank them or to partner them up to see who would, which team, which pairing would make maximization of growth potential for if they were to start a business together. What was really cool is that so they obviously had this cognitive map because they didn't give them all the information. They only give them bits of the information. And then they were using their own mental model to work out how, to make these best pairings out of the two. And so when they were doing this, they were measuring using MRI or fMRI, the functional magnetic resonance imaging, which is not that easy to say. But they saw that the way that people do wayfinding, or the way people do navigation using these grid cells that are referred to earlier, exactly the same things were being fired doing this type of task. So it just sort of shows that we take the information that we have in front of us, I think in some sort of written form, we use that to then create or generate our own mental model in order to fill the gaps, which is, again, I kind of feel that it's one of these things that you say, well, yeah, we know that, we do that, but it's just so. In fact, it's so simple, it's stunning that it hasn't been done before. But I would guess that the technology hasn't been there to be able to study the brain in the way that they have with this research. So it's, again, I presume it's taken us back to a fundamental piece of work that we'll have to leverage against in future research, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think you did a great job kind of outlining the research there, and really just kind of want to highlight, that we think about navigation. You might think about it in a grid-like representation, and they even talk about these grid cells. And basically, we're abstracting that grid-like representation where you might take, if you think about like an A1 to Z29 or something, right? Or I guess, what is it, Z26? You might take A1, B2, C2, so on to get to Z26. And you're thinking about this in terms of a grid. And I know this is abstract and kind of hard to conceptualize, so I'm trying my best to describe it. But as they're doing that, they're making these connections between two landmarks, right? A1 and Z26. And you're doing the same thing when it comes to some of these novel solutions. And you're absolutely right. This is one of those things that's like, well, yeah, no duh. That water is, in other news, water is blue, here on Earth. But I think it is important, right? We see these studies, I would say, infrequently, where it's one of those, this really, no one's looked at this before, but it's incredibly important, and I think will be referenced, a lot going forward. This is published in Nature, so if that gives you any indication of its importance, impact factor of Nature is undeniable, and so I think it is definitely seminal going forward. You want to talk about this wine analogy that they're using here?
I was just about to say, one of the best things I love about this paper is the fact that we not only, so they talk about the good stuff like rodent studies and things like that, but they actually come along with something that I can very much ascribe to, which is a wine analogy. So, and I'll just quote it from them, that the study suggests that the human brain does not have a wine list with fixed values, but locates wine in an abstract multidimensional space, which allows for computing new decision values according to the current demand. In fact, there's a slightly better quote further up where it says, for example, people might choose wine A over wine B based on price or the pretty label, depending on what your factors are. But we know that our preferences can change by the food you will pair with the wine. And whilst I like it just because anything that refers to wine is quite high on my list, I think for me what it's saying is that yes, you in any normal situation you might choose between A or B, but it's actually all contextual and it's all about the environment that you're in. And on one day you might choose it because of this reason. On the other day, going back to the wayfinding, you might choose a different route because actually it has more underground and because it's raining. And so depending on the circumstance will make you make different decisions. But fundamentally, we have we as animals, because it does point out that it's actually not just humans, it is animal, all animals will basically use a mental model to work out what it doesn't know and to draw upon other experiences that it's had. One of the bits that I think that is interesting in this, that is a bit of a throwaway line, but I think it does have some underpinning things that we do need to think about, is that it does say that this is much harder to achieve with artificial intelligence. So for me, that's sort of, the artificial intelligence that we see at the moment with automated cars and things like that, it's all based on effectively sort of knowledge-based systems and very quick decision making, and doing, it knows the rules and the routes it's going to take. Artificial intelligence can't do what we're talking about here. It cannot really sit there and take some abstract pieces of knowledge and then come up with its own solution through the middle. We still have to give it a framework and a guide to make that happen. So I think is the other driver around this paper is actually highlighting the difference between animals and just actually showing just how far autonomy has to go.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think I wanted to get into the application piece of it, and that's a great place to start, right? You're right in that artificial intelligence requires sets to be trained against to build that model of how do you get from A1 to Z26. I'll use the same grid model, right? Because it might go A1, A2, A3, A4, all the way down A, and then all the way across to Z to get there. As one path, and then as it explores, it might say, okay, well, actually, it's quicker to go A1, B2, C3 diagonally down to get to Z26, and that's the quickest way. But then you can throw other things on that grid as obstacles, right? I'm just describing generally how AI works. You can throw obstacles in there, and it'll find the quickest way around those obstacles. But again, you have to say, here's point A and here's point B, and here are some examples of how you get there. If you were to just throw point A and I guess I said point B, but point Z right on that grid, it might not necessarily know what it's doing. I guess the better example would say, here's a grid, and it doesn't know what to do with that, right? That's kind of we don't know what's going on until you give it that training set of those 2 points. Then it doesn't know exactly what to do.
And we've seen that, I think, in a fair amount of technology at the moment, which is exploratory. So some of the first AI or knowledge-based system work was around the traveling salesman problem, and that was done largely just through pure rule-based work, and that's sort of evolved, but it's still based on you give it you give the AI an initial lesson, and it extrapolates from that. What we have at the moment is if you were to put some vehicle on Mars to do mapping and tell you to go places on Mars, then it would struggle to do it in what we would deem an efficient manner because it just has to follow rules and it doesn't necessarily know the environment. So I think there is definitely things here for the technology basis. But also, I think there is a real angle here for us to understand human error as well, because understanding this difference between how we make decisions at this deep level will perhaps give us a better insight into when we're analyzing human error or potential human error, of just how we, if we're in an unknown situation, how we will come up to a certain solution. Because one of my I get not criticisms as such, but I guess it is a criticism, is with the human error world at the moment, we focus a lot on making a small number even smaller, reducing that element of risk. What we need to get to is understanding about how truly we come to deal with decisions that we don't know about, and this might provide the starting point for that sort of research and that sort of guidance.
Yeah, decision making is interesting in general, right? Because I mean, this kind of helps us with a new framework, but there's a lot of things that go into decision making, like past experiences, any cognitive biases going into this thing, sort of even commitment and sunk cost fallacy. That all kind of plays into decision making. Even individual differences between people can impact how you might approach a situation.
Absolutely.
So thinking about this being used in application, right? We might be able to apply this framework as a way to look at these decision-making problems in real scenarios and say, okay, well, if they are in fact using this grid-based system or these grid cells, how might a fighter pilot make a split-second decision to pull the ejector to eject their seat? Versus versus stay in the cockpit and try to correct, right? Like that's a real world example of using this framework to figure out how they might do that, right? And you might consider things like if you look at that grid, you might have potentially down the line a way to plot some of these I guess gamuts that I mentioned, individual differences, cognitive biases. You might have a way to plot those on this grid and understand or anticipate what decisions they might make based on the context around them. So this is actually way more important than I think we're letting on, because it does provide sort of a waypoint for the future to reference back to this and build off of.
I think you're right. I think I was just going to say, I think this is more about right now. I don't think we're necessarily there in a place where we can use this yet. I think we are still in the phase of understanding.
Right.
And so to use your example about how does the pilot pull the ejector seat or not? I think we would use this model to understand why he or she made the decision that they made right now. But I would hope that maybe in either a few years' time or 10 years' time, this would have been that springboard for us to then say, we now know how that decision made. Therefore, this is how it affects our design. This is how it affects the processes or procedures that we put into place. So that's how I think it could be used. But it's so fundamental at the moment. I don't think it can be used for that yet.
Yeah, I agree. I was really looking very future forward there with my my speculation for application, but that is me, right? I do want to, like, I don't know. Whenever I look at these stories, I always like to try to figure out a way to apply it to everyday situations. And you're right, that is a far way off. But yeah, highlighting the importance of this type of research for building off of in the future. Yeah, understanding what's going on. Is there anything else that you want to bring up about this piece of research here?
Well, I think the final bit for me really would be the relationship between this and just general wayfinding. I think that whole piece about how we do wayfinding, and I was having a conversation the other day with a colleague around cognitive wayfinding and the idea about how you traverse your own mental maps. Or your own mental model, sorry. Let's get back onto the terminology. How you traverse them and make them work. And I think the analogy that's got with what this is talking about is very, very strong. And I think it's one of these things I'm going to have to take away and go and actually now really think about it. But what I like about this sort of paper, and it's like with some of the stuff that you've been talking about, is the ability to talk about this type of thing and put it into more of a language and more of a discussion that actually makes it more palatable. Because we sort of said right at the beginning, it's full of some very big words of things that are maybe not part of our own day-to-day working. But it's really good to be able to discuss this and actually put it into a meaningful context.
Yeah, I agree. We did ask everyone for social thoughts. I do want to get to Lewis. So Lewis Chuang, he actually provided a social thought here. The question was, and we dropped this last week because we had some recording issues, but what methods do you use to make better decisions? And Lewis says, I run all mine through the long-suffering Francisca, which is the other co-chair of the Neuroergonomics Conference, which actually this content feels very much in line with that. So if you're listening from the Neuroergonomics Conference, hello, welcome. We typically get a lot of new listeners around conference time. But Lewis goes on to say, otherwise I usually try to set a countdown timer period to allow for cool down, rely extensively on scheduled actions, messages, or reminders. And I think that kind of fits with this model, right? If you think about if you think about all those, what did I say? They were like gamuts or components that you might be able to plot on this decision-making grid. You might have things like messages or reminders on that grid to help guide you to make a decision one way or another. Yeah, I that's what I got.
No, I get actually just off that message. I think one of the things it does raise is the when do you know you've got enough information to make a decision? So from a military perspective, they do often say, any decision is better than no decision. Any decision has to be timely. So it's no point making a decision way after whatever the opportunity has gone. So that's possibly another thing within this is how do we know using our mental model that we do have enough information to make a decision to go forward, Or just at what point do you say, right, I've just got to do something? So I don't know quite how that would fit in with that network. It's almost like having a big stop clock above the whole thing and saying, right, we're done now. Just make the best of it, and crack on.
Yeah. All right. Well, I just want to thank you, our patrons this week, for selecting our topic, and thank you to our friends over at UC Davis for our news story this week. If you want to follow along, you can join me on office hours every Monday evening Pacific time, where I find these news stories, and we do post the links to our original articles and our weekly roundups on our blog. You can also join us in our Slack or Discord communities for more discussion on these topics. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll see what's going on in the Human Factors community right after this.
Human Factors Cast brings you the best in human factors news, interviews, conference coverage, and overall fun conversations into each and every episode we produce. But we can't do it without you. The Human Factors Cast network is 100% listener supported. All the funds that go into running the show come from our listeners. Our patrons are our priority, and we want to ensure we're giving back to you for supporting us. Pledges start at just $1 per month and include rewards like access to our weekly Q&As with the hosts, personalized professional reviews, and Human Factors Minute, a Patreon-only weekly podcast where the hosts break down unique, obscure, and interesting human factors topics in just 1 minute. Patreon rewards are always evolving, so stop by patreon.com/humanfactorscast to see what support level may be right for you. Thank you, and remember, it depends.
Yes, and we are back. Huge thank you, as always, to our patrons, especially our honorary Human Factors Cast staff, Michelle Tripp. Patrons like you keep the show running. Thank you all so much for your continued support. If you want to become a patron, there's you can do that. It's something that we do. You can help choose the news. You can get access to Human Factors Minute. It's all there in the advertisement. We've actually been releasing some early audio for them as part of the coverage of the Neuroergonomics Conference. You get early access to that type of thing. There's a lot of benefits there. Anyway, if that's something that you can do, check it out. It might be something you can help out with. Otherwise, I think I'll shut up now. Let's just get into this next part of the show.
It came from.
Yes, it came from This Week It's All Reddit. This is the part of the show where we search all over the internet to bring you topics the community is talking about. If you find these answers useful, give us a like to help other people find this content wherever you're at. We have 3 tonight, and I want to break these down one by one. So we'll get into this first one here by TWA8U on the HCI subreddit. This one is titled Categorical Difference in Job Roles. It says, what is the difference in work and results, or the end product, in roles such as UX designer, UX engineer, UX designer, UX writer, project manager, product designer, and visual designer? Some colleagues have specialization in computing, industrial design, psychology, and digital media. Aren't they all the same? P.S. I graduated and worked in finance to move into content writing, so social media, blogs, emailers, which is delivering simple solutions delivered by the client in an interesting way. So it sounds to me like they are trying to understand the difference of these various roles to what I'm thinking is they're probably writing job descriptions. But I want to get your thoughts on this, because I think it is a really important question. Like, what is the difference between all these roles, at least in your experience?
Yeah, and I think this is a really good example of where things maybe differ slightly in the US and the UK as well. The first thing that threw me, I was trying to work out what the difference between the UX designer was and the UX designer was, and I think they just wrote the same thing twice. So. But certainly when you look at the, like the project manager role, that's a definite standout as something that is more universal about keeping the project on track, and making sure that they've got everything facilitated they need. The difference between UX designer, engineer, researcher, or writer, and just a standard product designer and visual designer will be all around their engagement and and really, I guess, the media that they use. But there is a certain element there around, they're not necessarily all the same, but to coin the phrase that's a bit famous, it depends on the organization that you're going into. But fundamentally, for me, your UX designer is all about putting together what things should look and feel like. Your engineer is about putting more together, that prototype, and making sure them kind of things work. Your researcher is that fundamental underpinning piece about why you do what you do, and making sure that the usability is works with your end user or your end user audience. I've got to admit, UX writer is a new one on me. Presumably that's a content piece, but I am guessing to a certain extent. But I don't know. What about from your perspective? I think from a UK perspective, I don't think UX is quite as mature as it is in the US. So perhaps we don't necessarily break down our roles in quite this sort of way, or to this level of detail. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great breakdown. I think you had it right there. The designer is sort of the look and feel, engineer is prototyper, researcher is the one who's going out and talking to users. Writer is also new to me too. When I think about these other three, project manager, product designer, and visual designer. Project manager is the person who's overseeing everything. Product designer and UX designer are interesting. I think product designer could be more broad strokes of like goals for the product. This could be like, we want the product to do capability A, capability B, and capability C, where the designer is actually detailing out the fine details of those implementations. And the visual designer, it differs, at least for me, from the product designer or the UX designer, in that they're more the look, and the UX designer is more the feel, or the interaction. UX designer is more the interaction of the look and feel, and the visual designer might establish the look of the product. So I think there's a lot of roles here, but ultimately, the point that I want to make here is that it depends. There it is, right? It really depends on what you see your role in the company being, right? You might be someone who, with like, Blake's skill set, he has the ability to do some front end coding, and so he might consider himself an engineer, even though he participates in research, and can actively design some interfaces. Like, it just depends on what you want to call yourself. A lot of times, your responsibilities will change based on the need of the product, and it might not always be the same thing, and there's a lot of bleed over between these. And I basically, I don't know, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Just do what you are comfortable with and what your specialty is, and kind of what needs to be done, and that, I think, should meet the standards, especially when it comes to talking about your previous experience in things like job interviews or talks or anything like that. I don't really think putting a label on it impacts you too much there. I do want to bring up this point here on specialization in computing, industrial design, psychology, digital media. Engineering is another one that frequently comes up. Do you have any thoughts on like what the difference in backgrounds are, and how that kind of applies to your role?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it can definitely flavor or bias your approach. So my background is engineering. So I'm as well as being a chartered ergonomist, I'm a chartered engineer, and so that really gives me that real sort of, not only an engineering approach to what I do. I tend to take more of a systems engineering approach, but also it means that if I'm trying to work with other teams, as we invariably do, I actually feel more at home talking to the engineers side of things and trying to get our principles across to them and what we're doing. But I think everything gives you a bit of almost a core of where you come from. I mean, certainly again in the UK, we're in a position now that the undergraduate degrees, or your first degree that you get as either a human factors or a UX engineer or practitioner, they don't really exist now. that you don't actually beget the human factors knowledge, kind of the human factors degree, until your master's degree. So your second degree, effectively. And so most people now coming into our domain will have a previous background. For us, it may just I'll probably get shot down for saying this, but there's a large psychology bent coming into human factors, and a large amount of engineering, I think. So yeah, it is interesting, and it is interesting how it flavors people's views and approaches on how they do the day job. The other thing I think I would bring up about so many different roles, I think it really depends on the size of the organization. Because if you're going into a very large organization, then chances are, yes, they will have more roles split out, because it helps to differentiate people. Most of the projects I think I work on, I'm probably, with two notable exceptions, I've been one of either one or one of two or three HF people working on them, and so all of them roles is me. It's we stick our finger in all of them pies. And now I'm even doing more and more project management, which sometimes fills me with joy, sometimes not so much. But I think it really the size of the organization really matters, and seeing the specializations, I think they're a good idea. I think they really help give some depth to what's going on. So yeah, whoever did this, good luck with what they move into.
Yeah, I agree. I think you made a good point about kind of, the size of the organization. I have had a similar experience where, I might be a little bit of a designer, and a little bit of a researcher, and a little bit of a writer, and writing requirements along the way, kind of sticking my toes into the engineer pile. So agree. I think it really does depend on the size of the organization, and I roll my eyes at it depends, but in terms of background, it's interesting too, because you're right. I think the majority is probably psychology or engineering, and I would say not. I'm probably gonna get in trouble for this too, but don't worry too much about which background you come from. As long as you're in human factors, your goal is to make things better for the end user. And I think as long as our goals are aligned, how we get there might take different paths. And someone like Barry might be better at writing requirements or interacting with engineering folks, and I might be better at other things. Although I think Barry's probably much better at everything than I am.
I'm blushing, and I don't think that's right.
I mean, I as a psychology background, I might be more influenced by the research side of things, where I'm interacting with users and have different tools, or might understand cognitive psychology from a different perspective, and might be able to implement some of those in the design. So there might be some differences in your background, but ultimately the goal's the same, right? Make things better for the end user.
Right. But also with them different backgrounds as well, where it really comes really nicely is when you get together and be working as a team. And if you've got 2 or 3 people who come from different backgrounds, when you come together and gel as a team, that adds such a richness to the output of what you've got. As I've said recently, generally I work in very small teams, but I was doing a project recently where I was in a department of around 25 human factors people, but all coming from different areas. And it was just such a nice experience to come and say, right, I've got this problem. How do we think we'd solve it? And people will be coming up with different ideas from really practical and applied, or pure, what I would term like almost pure human factors approaches to, well, actually, I did some of this, and I've applied it in this way from a psychology background or from an engineer. And it was just so nice to be in that world where you can actually come together as a cohort and have such a rich variety of experiences.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, let's get into this next one here. This one's from our Pexels Alive, from the user experience Reddit. This one is titled "Odd Situation Where the Feedback of One Stakeholder Holds the Most Weight Out of Others." They go on to write, "I'm in a new predicament on my latest project and was hoping to get a second opinion on this. I finished the second round of initial stakeholder surveys and have gotten some amazing comments in the surveys. The client has already provided a previous unused design for their interface, and I included questions about it in the surveys. basically just wanted to know in so many words why they had the previous design, what it was for, and why can't they just use that, basically. Why did they hire my team and I to make something brand new when they already had something? The feedback I got from the stakeholder survey was pretty minimal, except for what I received from one person in particular who carries a lot of influence over the approval process. When I asked about the previous design, person noted some very specific things they wanted and didn't want it in the design. Then made a visual comparison to a very familiar project management tool I regularly use. So my take is that the previous design has already influenced them too much, and they're set on what they want. My initial research and ideation resulted in something a little different, so I'm pretty upset that I probably have to throw out my sketches. My question is, how do you handle a situation where a single stakeholder holds most of the power and already knows what they want?
That's a tough one, isn't it? It's the as somebody who works a lot in the military domain, I come across this on quite a regular basis, and actually for quite legitimate reasons. That you have a user community made up of probably, obviously the military is a very has a very hierarchy installed in it, and you can have lots of discussions with lots of people in the room until the most senior officer walks in the room, and then suddenly everybody's got the same opinion, and it's a senior officer's opinion. But I think there's two elements of this that I think is quite interesting. That the fact that they went out for user feedback, that they did the survey and actually got very little feedback about it. And then when they actually went to they got this one person who was not only the only person or one of the few people who actually responded, and then they're very influential. Now, I guess you've got to look at the influence of the person involved and say, well, is it influence upon the organization itself or influence upon the success of the product? And the two are slightly nuanced. But fundamentally, as long as you've done as much as you can possibly do for the client, and if they are effectively the client representation and they're happy with the way that it goes, then sometimes you just got to do what you paid for. But it's a tough situation when I'm sure we've all been there when you've come out with what you think is a really cool design. It meets all the requirements. It does the right thing. And the client's seen something else and gone, yeah, but I want it to look like that because basically they want that, but cheaper.
Right.
What do you think?
I want to talk about a couple things here. There's size, and there's the size of the proposed changes, right? That you might want to implement in end product. There's also your role as a user researcher or a UX researcher. There's also at play here, which things are going to be best for the user out of many things that might be better for the user, right? So to me, there's three things, right? Who has responsibility for the direction of the product? Who what updates to the design will best improve the user's performance? And I forgot my middle point, but I'll get back to it. So let's first talk about who has influence over this project, right? So when you think about the singular stakeholder that has a lot of sway, this might be a product manager who is determining what direction the product is going. That might be out of your control at this point. Now, I will say there are some tactics that you can use to help sway these types of roles in a certain direction. You might come back to them with user research that indicates that this design might not be optimal. Let them come to that decision on their own. Your best bet here is to kind of convey the user comments, and again, this is a whole other conversation about how you do that diplomatically without upsetting anybody. But having those types of roles that are determining the direction of the project come to those conclusions on their own is a big part of it. The one thing I forgot was the size of the changes, right? Are you talking about a whole overhaul of the system, or are you talking about just maybe minor updates here and there? I think you might be able to pick your battles, which is the third point about which which pieces you want to include, right? If it's a whole overhaul that's going to make this thing better, right? Like, let's say you're using I'm just going to use an arbitrary example here, a right-click menu versus a ribbon at the top of whatever product you're using. You might have all the controls in a right-click menu, but it might be more efficient to put them in a ribbon across the top. And you might want to advocate for some other control mechanism for those controls on that display specifically, but that's not your place to at least I don't see it as my place to influence the direction of the product if I've just been hired to do some research on the current implementation. Again, try to get them to get you there. And then the last piece is picking those battles, right? If it is going to be a huge influence on user performance and you have metrics to back this up, sort of categorizing that return on investment and making sure that the people involved understand what's at stake here, like, oh, the discoverability of this control is, they find it, 10 times faster. Well, that's going to be huge for, some of those some of those battles that you want to pick. So anyway, picking your battles, understanding the size and scope of the project, and understanding who ultimately makes the decisions is going to be a big piece of this. So it depends.
I'm sensing a theme here. But no, I mean, that picking the battles is truly a key one, because there's I find myself quite often in that situation where you've got, you want to change not only ABC but XYZ as well. But actually you've got to turn around and say, well, actually, if they're not bought into everything I'm doing and I can't convince them by sheer numbers, because if they're convinced by sheer numbers, then they've probably been there already. You're probably going on something because you think it's quite cool, or you just think it's the right direction. So it's probably fairly marginal. Sometimes we've just got to remember that we are the representative of the user, but we don't run the world. Even though I like to think I run the world on many occasions. Fundamentally, some things you just got to say, well, I tried, but let's not waste my energy anymore. Let's focus on the stuff I can achieve, and crack on.
Yeah, great points. Let's get into this last one here. This one is by Jessica Perlman on the User Experience subreddit. We've seen that name before. So this is their first time building a design team. They're feeling excited and terrified, and they need help and advice. So they go on to write, I have been the solo designer in the company, or we can talk about any really role here as being the only one there. I have been asking for more designers and for this opportunity to build a design team for a long time. And again, let's abstract it to research and design. Now that I have been given the green light to hire 3 to 4 more people, I'm excited and terrified at the same time. I've never managed anyone, and I feel like there are so many things I need to figure out, from putting together a job description to figuring out the hiring process to actually managing and supporting a team. I almost regret asking for this in the first place. Where should I start? I've ordered a couple of books, like Making a Manager and Org Design for Design Orgs. Would appreciate any help, advice, or tips. Barry, have you put together a design team or a research team, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, it's. I think I get completely where she's coming from. It's a scary time. It's a scary situation, but actually, it's really exciting as well. If you can do it right, then you get to empower a whole lot of people to come together and do some really cool stuff. So the first thing I would sort of suggest is they sort of mentioned about, what's the hiring process and stuff like that. There are other people paid in the company to do that. That's your HR department. Get onto them, assuming that you're, big enough it's a big enough company to do that. That there are other people in the organization who can worry about the mechanics. But fundamentally, what you need to be doing is work out what it is that you think you need, and what skills are complementary. There's sort of 2 elements I sort of play with this. Is I work out what I can afford to pull together. So is it in here they do 3 to 4 designers, but you might be a team of 10, it might be whatever it is. Do some of that, and then work out what the key 1 or 2 roles in there are to begin with. Because if you do a gradual hire, you pick out, you then can hire more people that build up on other people's strengths. And so gradually build up a team like that over a period of time. Now, the period of time might only be a month, but it might be longer than that. But identify 3 or 4 key roles first, or 2 or 3 key roles, and then hire to complement beside that. The other bit that I find really interesting, and I will credit a colleague of mine, Joe Paulson, with this, because he really got it with me that if you want to really build a successful team, you've got to hire successful people. You've got to hire good people. And the way he categorizes it, which I think is fascinating, is if you're an A person, you hire A people because that you want to bring in the best people to help complement your talent. But then B people hire C people because they feel that there's almost like an inferiority complex in there, that you don't want anybody showing you up for what you do. But fundamentally, you hiring people is not there to, make your tea, make your coffee and stuff like that. They're meant to come in and complement what you do and boost what you do. And fundamentally, if you're leading these people, then they're going to take your direction. They're going to take what you do and really empower it. So hire the best you can afford is probably the key thing that I've learned over time. And once you got them, keep them, because if you have a good team that comes together and gels well, that just pays back dividends. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of team building, I think, is not necessarily. It is absolutely hiring the right people for the right tasks, but it goes beyond that, right? I want to talk about like the piece once you've hired the right people. There's obviously team building exercises for a reason, and that's because you do want them to gel, like you said, right? You want them to sort of understand where everyone's coming from. You want to not only that, but build relationships between them, because the better communication flows between the same people or between different people working on the same project, the better that product is going to be, because you're not having overlapping work. And part of this is on you if you're going to be put into a management position. It's understanding exactly what pieces of work need to be done and who's responsible for those pieces of work. And even more than that, kind of the pipeline of events that need to happen in order for a piece of work to happen, right? You need to do research, then you need to analyze results, and then you need to create designs based on those results. And if you have a team, then you're going to want to stagger it. And at least my advice for this would be to hire a researcher first, because they need to be able to identify what it is exactly that you're looking for. And then maybe you hire, depending on the size, right? You might hire a prototyper later to, or a designer after that to help translate some of those findings into design, and then a prototyper to turn those designs into testable interfaces. And so kind of building it piecemeal, but understanding what each role does, I think, is a big part of it. I think you pretty much covered all the all the good bits of that. So we'll just go ahead and get into this next part of the show. Anything else for that one?
No, well, actually, the one last thing I would say is make sure you interview twice, and have one of them interviewing that you're interviewing them, but let them interview you. Really encourage them to show what they can do, and then talk to your people once you hired them, because you never know everything about somebody on interview, or even like a couple of interviews. They will have skills that you don't know about. They'll have skills that they don't know about that they can contribute to the business. So spend time when they first get into the organization, learning about them, making them feel comfortable, but also learning about what else they can do. What do they do in their free time? Because they'll have other things that they can complement to the business.
Look at that. I learned something today. That's a great point. I knew about it, just hearing it sort of codified is great. All right, let's get into this this part of the last part of the show. One more thing. It needs no introduction. This is where we just talk about one more thing. Barry, you got a really interesting one this week. What's your one more thing?
So my one more thing is actually a bit of an advertising plea, to be honest. I'm running an event next week, so next Wednesday, which is not this Wednesday, which I thought it was. As I was saying to you earlier, I nearly got myself into a right state thinking that I wasn't there. But I'm trying to kick around this idea of climate ergonomics, this idea that we as a community can really do something about climate change, because there's loads of people doing lots of really good stuff, loads of science, they're creating tools, they're creating all this stuff, but nobody's bringing it all together. And suddenly I had this epiphany moment of, we can pull this, we can do this, because this is what we do on a day-to-day basis. We glue projects together. We are the butter within that cream sandwich type thing. So part of this, we've been doing some work over the past month or so, where I'm holding a webinar next Wednesday on the 29th, through the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors. So it'll be 5 o'clock UK time. But I'm doing a bit of a presentation, but I've also got Murray Sinclair, who's from a professor from Loughborough University, Richard Plenty, an organizational psychologist and author, and Joe Paulson, managing director of Vindico and Think Air. They've been doing a lot of work around air pollution and IoT. And so we're going to be looking at the 3 different aspects of this, and how fundamentally, how can human factors and ergonomics make a difference to this problem? So come along, it will be fantastic. And there's no right answer to it. The whole idea is that we're trying to pull the community together and say, what human factors tools, techniques, ideas, or just general things can we pull together to help solve this issue?
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm on the list. I'm really excited to attend and see what it's all about. My one more thing is not so interesting, I guess. I don't know. Yours is very interesting and topical, especially after that climate report came out a couple weeks ago. But mine is on sort of the storytelling of the Haunting series on Netflix. My wife sat me down and had me watch the Haunting series because she thought I'd really enjoy it, and I did. The storytelling of these, I guess they're like 8 or 9 episode series. The director does a really good job of both ending on a cliffhanger and explaining a perspective of one individual per episode, and so it's such a layered story. In both cases of Hill House and Bly Manor, that as you understand more about a certain character, you understand more about the story, and they layer it in such a way that it's just like peeling off the onion. It's like, there's a whole onion there, but you can't see what's in it. And so once you peel off one layer, then you understand just a little bit more. And each layer is kind of getting its own focused episode. And it's an amazing way of telling stories, and I'd highly recommend anyone who's interested in that type of thing to go check it out. Anyway, I think that's going to be it for today, everyone. If you like this episode, we invite you to check out episode 181. If you like the flexible decision making that we talked about today, we're talking about reprogramming brain cells in that episode. Comment wherever you're at listening what you think of the story this week. For more in-depth discussion, you can join us on our Slack or Discord communities. You can visit our official website, sign up for our newsletter, stay up to date with all the latest human factors news. If you like what you hear, you want to support the show, there's a couple things you can do. 1, leave us a 5-star review. That is free for you to do. You can do that right now. 2, tell your friends about us. We grow from word of mouth. That really helps the show out. Or 3, if you have money and you want to throw it at us, consider supporting us on Patreon. We put all that right back into the show. As always, links to all of our socials and our website will be in the description of this episode. I want to thank Mr. Barry Kirby for being on the show today. Where can our listeners go and find you if they want to talk about decision making?
You can find me on Twitter at Baz_K, and you can come check my podcast out at any time, if I could say it properly, which is 1202 The Human Factors Podcast, and on any podcast directory near you.
We'll put a link to both of those in the description. As for me, I've been your host, Nick Roome. You can find me streaming on Twitch every Monday at sometime. Anyway, for office hours and across social media at Nick_Roome. Thanks again for tuning in to Human Factors Cast. Until next time,
it depends.
All right. If you're hanging out with us, stick around. I think we're going to do a little post show here.
Cool.
That was good.
Good. I enjoyed that. That was awesome fun.
That was great. Oh, man. What a fun show.
It's I've got to admit, I was somewhat nervous because obviously my show, I can it all. It's all I can. If I'm going to mess up, I can cut that out and all that sort of stuff. So to do everything live was a new and novel experience.
Good. Did you use any decision making when you did the
well,
when you encountered the novel experience?
Yeah, I drew it out in front of me and had 2 points so that I knew where they were, and then worked out to get between them from the start.
You have the intro and then the Patreon commercial in the middle, and you somehow made it through. And no, that was good. I'll be honest. I was a little worried about that story. Just because it has truthfully been a week since I read it, and I was a little disconnected from it. This morning was a little rough in terms of busyness, let me say. Like I didn't have the time to properly promote the show and like mention you, so it was like a quick mention from my phone. I wanted to make sure people knew. I'll do a much better job of promoting it after the fact. Yeah, that was cool. I mean, I was in a similar position where I was doing a
a big client presentation this morning, and I was like, I need to read this paper. I really need to read this paper. And then this big sort of 2.5, 3 hour presentation, which all over Teams was interesting. And then trying to get it all in. But it was, and like I said, the big words that they used were challenging. But I thought it was good. What I really like is having these sort of discussions when actually there was stuff that was just in the chat that we had. You sort of think about things from a different angle and whatnot. It's good fun.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really like about this format too. Is like, I won't think of something until we're like midway through the conversation. And go, oh, that's a great point. I'm gonna make that. And it's like, it is just a form to like kind of have a good discussion about human factor stuff. So. Yeah, usually during the post show we answer any chat coming in through our channels here. I think there's a couple folks watching, so if anyone has any questions, drop them for us. Otherwise, we could do. I don't know. What do you want to do in the post show? It's open for discussion.
I was going to say, normally by this time I'm very much asleep, so. I know I normally get when you're doing this bit, I normally get the pre-show bit. I'll sort of watch that on Twitch, and then I'll think, well, actually, I don't need to watch the actual show because I'll listen to because I listen to you on my way to and from work. So I'll listen to the podcast on the way to and from work, from where our main office is. So that's about 20 minutes drive. So you take over maybe 2 days to get the full. To get the full experience, but then when it comes to the post show, I think this is probably my first post show, so I feel very privileged to be here.
Let's talk about post show. So I mean, normally we like I said, we answer any questions that come in through the chat. Sometimes we have an extended discussion on the topic. I was admittedly struggling a little bit towards the end there for more content to fill that 30-minute window, but if we can think of anything, we can talk about it. Certainly. We can also talk about behind the scenes stuff. I think I like to reward people who stick around and, who enjoyed the show. They're here, they're listening. That means they like it, presumably. So, we can talk about behind the scenes things. I mean, you and I talked about something behind the scenes that I don't know if we're probably not ready to talk about that publicly yet, but there's, let's just say, exciting things potentially around the corner. Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair to say. I think some, the ways that we can function in the future.
Yes, exactly.
Possibly a way to tease it. But no, I think it's this type of thing that I think is brilliant because there's, as I guess I said in the show, there's not enough people who just shout about what we do, and it was quite interesting. I do think that the perspectives of human factors in the US and the UK is something that is really worth exploring because there are so few of us in the UK. Literally, you can probably fit if you just take sort of human factors and the UX world in the UK. There is just not many. I think there's less than 1,000 chartered human factors practitioners in the UK.
Oh wow.
And I did an interview with NASA talking about their Orion program, and I saw it was one of them sort of discussions that we'd had where I was like, oh yes, you've got so many people, you do this, that, and the other, and they're just so very much of the, well, yeah, we've got a person who does this. And I was like, oh, from us, we're doing a sort of similar scale program, not putting somebody into space, but it was a big program we're working on, and there was 3 of us who did all of them roles. It's just I think the number of practitioners you've got over there is just dwarfs us by a massive number.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned membership numbers of Chartered Institute of Human Factors and Ergonomics. That's right? Chartered Institute.
Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors.
Ergonomics and Human Factors. I messed it up. So yeah, I mean, like I haven't been up to date on the numbers of HFES. I think it's in the multiple thousands. I think last I checked, it was something like 4,000 or something like that. Maybe more by now. That was a while ago. So yeah, it is kind of insane, right? Because I mean, like, just generally, do you have any like human factors agencies over there that do consulting work on a mass sort of basis with a building full of human factors practitioners, or?
No, there's few and far between now. I think now there's, I would say there's 3. Am I going to get in trouble for saying just 3? I think there's only 3. What I would say are large departments left of human factors practitioners. There was a really cool research department that I used to work for, and that's now disbanded. There was a company that my wife used to work for, and they had a really large human factors department or human science department. That's disbanded. So there's probably only a couple very large teams left. Most people now are either probably working in academic institutions or working in much smaller teams of 1 to 5 or less. So I think our ability to be more of the jack of all trades is a really key attribute to have. Most of us sort of run small consultancies, I think. So it's interesting, but also I think we're still on a trajectory of getting human factors established as well, because we very much still in the safety critical environment, absolutely, it's embedded. In the defense environment, it's embedded, but still out in the civilian world, as it were, or the non-safety arena, it's still fighting to have its place.
Is UX, like the term UX, as prevalent over there?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's certainly the up and coming cool thing to be doing.
Okay.
And I think we are still struggling with how does UX and HF fit together and come along for the ride, because for me personally, and this is my opinion, and sue me, is that the UX is really just is a subset of HF.
I've always been of that opinion, and maybe you can share your thoughts on this too. But like I feel that there are let's say some individuals that kind of stick their nose up at UX and kind of don't think of it as I don't know, as necessary, or they feel like it's people pretending to do human factors and that it's not valid. I feel like there are people out there like that. And I think that's absolutely the wrong way to think about it. I think, and I think you think this way too, especially, sort of trying to do the inclusive approach for climate ergonomics, even to, get people from multiple disciplines. I think we got to do the same thing with human factors and say, look, you're part of our umbrella. Let's include you, because that will boost membership and boost awareness even of, what we're doing.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's so much out there that actually we can learn from each other. I think we are in danger of splitting off strongly into 2 different disciplines when fundamentally we're doing the same thing. I think we just come at it from a slightly different approach. For me, an HF approach is based on, making sure people are safe, making sure people are doing the right thing, and almost I've always I have in my head a vase model where the HF comes bottom up, and you get to the cool product in the middle. Whereas UX comes from a top down, and they're looking to make a really nice product that sells. And I think for me, this is fundamentally kind of where it comes from, is that they are really going for a target market. They want something that looks good and is really acceptable really quickly. But how you get there, the fundamental underpinning structures, the systems engineering, all that sort of stuff, it doesn't really matter. That'll get sorted out later. And fundamentally, we all going to the same place. We're just taking two slightly different approaches to it. It all comes under the same banner, and I think the sooner we can actually work at bringing it all together in a way that, because you say that some people stick their nose up on one side of the fence. I think people stick their nose up on both sides of the fence.
I agree.
And quite, it's almost like having your children. You just want to kindly bang their heads together and say, look, why can't we all just get along?
We're all part of the same family.
Yeah, exactly right. So, but no, we do have that in the UK. There is work ongoing at the moment to look at the way that UX and HF works together. And there's been a couple of sort of webinars and events on that fairly recently. But there's I still think there's a long way to go. But the sooner we can get there, then the better for everyone, really.
Yeah, a lot of work to do. I know HFES does a whole UX day, so they have a whole day set aside for UX stuff, which is great. It's a great start.
Yeah.
I think, and this is just my opinion, but there are some things that that professional societies, I'm not calling out any in particular, but professional societies can do to help improve their visibility within the UX community. And that's either changing the name of their society to include UX or user experience, or improving, search engine optimization on their websites to include those search terms so that way it comes up when people look for UX societies or UX conferences or anything like that, right? Because if you search up UX conferences, you'll get things like UXPA, you'll get other things like, there's another one I'm thinking of, but anyway, you'll get those, right? You won't get the CIEHF, you won't get HFES, you'll get those other ones. And I think there are ways that we can certainly include those search terms, at least on the websites, right, to get it more visible.
Absolutely, and I think the more we can do around people's careers as well, because people want to get certainly something we're struggling with at the moment is how does a UX person get the right post nominals? People like having the letters after the name type of thing. Well, with the current structures we have in the UK, that if you want to get that, you have to understand the full breadth of human factors, and that's how you get your chartership and things like that. Whereas we currently have the discussions around, well, is that the right thing to be doing? Is that inclusive of the UX community? Because they do, whilst it might be more focused on what they do, with what they're delivering, that's not to say that it's worth any less. It's not to say that they're outside of our domain. How can we recognize what they do in a way that makes them feel part of their community as well as part of the wider community? I think there is a long way to go, but like I said, a good bit of SEO wouldn't do anybody any harm.
No, and I think you bring up a great point there. Like how when they come to conferences, they're bringing knowledge of their domain that is largely applied, right? They're doing this in applied settings, and I feel like the folks at some of these conferences, again, not naming names, but they're largely academic. And that was one thing that I really appreciated about the Neuroergonomics Conference, was that it felt applied, in that they were consistently bringing up ways in which this technology or studies could be used in industry. And I think that's the bridge, right? Once you get the UX folks in there that can show academia what they're doing in industry, then academia can understand, adapt, and present research that then could be used and cited and utilized by those industry professionals. And once that bridge is gapped, I think we're in good shape.
I think you're right. I think one of the things that the CIHF conference has done over the past couple of years is start to include a lot more case studies, a lot more practical application, and certainly I felt I can go in and actually learn, how people have applied different tools, techniques, and things like that, rather than just underlying theory. Somebody did suggest to me a couple of years ago, well, actually, we should go all practical, all applied, because what's the point in learning the academic stuff? That's what the academics are for. But for me, it is that continuum. You've got to be able to sit there and work out, the up-and-coming underlying theory. That's brilliant, so you can maybe have a say in how that's applied. But then, also, you're looking 3-4 years down the line to think, how was it applied? Has it been applied? How's that come out? And I think getting the blend between the two, it's never easy. And I think the people who organize conferences, they normally volunteers as well, so they get the rough end of every stick. But I think they're really open now to looking at the breadth of what we need to do, and certainly the CIHF conference next year, I think, should have a decent blend to it. But we'll see what fundamentally it's down to people wanting to present some of this stuff as well, because it's never an easy thing to do.
I mean, if there are a few thoughts here, if there are funds available, why not invite people from industry to help bridge that gap, right? Like get notable people as keynote speakers, or presenters that might want to present their work. I know it at HFES, oftentimes Google, Facebook, Apple are there, but those are the big ones, right? Maybe reach out to some of the smaller tech companies to see if they would want to come and talk about some of their work. They might not be as funded as some of the bigger ones, but they might still have something to present. And then you also have the other thought of this this mixing of the two domains or two industries or however you want to think about it. They're one and the same, really, but the two search terms that we're talking about here. This is like a goldmine of opportunity for like socials, right? You have like a industry academia mixer that is like a speed dating or like one of the speed matchmaking events where you sit and talk to somebody for 5 minutes and then you move to a different table, and you have all the academics line up on one side and you have all the industry people line up on the other side, and you just move, kind of from one table to the next, meeting the next person. And that could be really interesting because one of those conversations might spark, an idea in the person in industry, or even as the industry person is talking about their work, it might spark something for future research in academia. So I think, to me, that would be an awesome event. I would love to do that. I would love to sit down and just, I'm in industry over here, so it's like sit down and listen to people. What research you got? How cool. How could that be applied?
What's your big idea? I think it does also highlight actually that's one of the things that I think we've missed a lot over the pandemic, and actually where that Neuroergonomics Conference was using the software it was using. I can't remember the name of it now. Gather, there we go. Was just that little bit different, wasn't it? The fact that that platform allowed a level of interaction that you weren't just sitting watching Zoom or whatever platform you're using. You're not just looking at the presentations, which are fabulous. They're great, and lots of people put lots of effort into them. But for me, I love going to the Ergonomics Conference every year in the UK because you get to meet a lot of people in the bar. You get to go afterwards and have a few beers, probably a few more beers, and talk to your friends about what you saw about the various papers, the presentations, work out when your mates went wrong, or if in my case when mine went wrong, and people could mock me. But it's really friendly, and you can debate it. That's the thing I missed, I think, over the past 18 months. So I'm quite looking forward to next year. Hopefully, we will get back to some face-to-face events. But the one thing has opened up, actually, just as a tangent, is the fact that more people have been able to access this content. So, when I've been running webinars and stuff pre-COVID, you maybe have a few people on, maybe 20, 30 people come join a webinar. Whereas now more people are coming in from around the world because people know that content's out there. We're now used to using this type of interface to actually engage with it. So it's actually giving us a really big opportunity. So what's going to be really interesting is how organizations blend some of this stuff, because the online stuff is really valuable for getting people who maybe can't take the time out of work or anything like that to go and spend a whole week at a conference, because it is it's a substantial thing. So what are these future conferences going to look like where we blend the online or the virtual with the physical?
Yeah, I was talking with somebody about this. So Blake and I have talked HFES's ears off about this, but I think you're right. There is this real opportunity right now, and I think, I think not just with HFES, but a lot of organizations and societies tend to hold their content close, and I feel like they need to let it go just a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit, right? Like, to me, the ideal conference looks like this. Stream the keynotes and important plenaries on a streaming service, YouTube, Twitch, whatever. Promote the hell out of it. Get people to show up live, ask questions in the moment. Ask those questions at the physical event. People will show up at the physical event. It'll be like a live stream thing. After it's over, lock access to it. Have people show up for that live event. If they show up live, they're rewarded for being there. They're able to ask the questions. Of course, you can pay for the access to it later. But driving that excitement around an event, it will create availability in people's schedules, and make it to where it's not like a webinar where you have to register. Make it just freely available. And this is probably me as like a someone who's advocating for access and accessibility within human factors and making that accessible and entertaining and fun. But I think it could be successful, right? Like, I would, if I knew that CIEHF or HFES or CHI or UXPA made their presentations available, I would mark it in my calendar and plan around it, because I would want to be there for it. I want to be able to ask these questions, and to be able to attend more things like that would be super cool. I think locking it behind the webinar mechanism is a little, I get it. You're able to track metrics, but you can track metrics on the other platforms too. It's just different metrics.
I think it is. I think the one thing that was open, that I had my eyes opened up to a couple of weeks ago, is just the sheer cost of putting on a conference, right?
Yeah.
So even just an online one. So Gareth Locke is putting on this, and I think it's this weekend, his diving conference, and it's human factors in diving, which I thought when I first met him a few years ago, I was like, "There's no way you're going to get that off the ground." I smiled nicely at him and all this type of thing. Oh, that sounds good. And he's like, "No, I'm going to. And my entire business is going to be around this." And I'm like, "Yeah, you quite frankly, mate, you're nuts." But he's done it. He's written a book, and he's brilliantly doing it. But he's putting this conference on. It's online, and he sort of gave me an insight into the costs that he's having to sink into it to make it work. So for the hosting, for all that type of stuff, and it's going to be a slick platform and all that sort of stuff. It's going to be brilliant. But we're talking about tens of thousands of pounds to make it all work. And I was like, wow, okay. And so hopefully he sells out, and he'll break even and all that sort of stuff. But it's not as easy as I thought it was going to be. I was like, well, let's just chuck up something on Zoom. Teams can do webinars now. How hard can this be? But to get that nice slick interface, that nice slick working environment, a bit like using Gather or whatever, is a significant undertaking.
Yeah. I just hope that in the future, these mixed methods of attending conferences are truly mixed, right? Like, how cool would it be to sit on a virtual panel, and submit a question, and have people sitting there physically in the audience pull out their phones and write down questions that they want to ask, and have it just come up at the end of the session on a screen or something. Like, understand that the technology that's a lot, but these mixed method conferences would be a huge opportunity for disseminating information and sharing information too. Like, that'd be really neat, because then everyone could then point their their portfolios, their personal research to those events, and have data is cheap and all that stuff now. So, you have a permanent record of that event online that people could go back and look at if they had questions about that research.
Right, and be inspired by it. The more we can push this stuff wider, then I think we can do it. In fact, what I'm hoping for the Ergonomics Conference next year is that we will have a tranche of it on climate ergonomics or climate change and sustainability. And so if we do get enough papers in to make that a thing, then maybe we should have a bit of a discussion on how we can open that up and make it multimedia and that type of thing. Because I think that could be quite an exciting challenge to throw at the coordinate. And they're going to hate me for doing it, but I think it could be quite a laugh.
It'll be worth it. It'll be absolutely worth it.
Yeah, I think so.
And especially with a topic like that, needs to be visible.
Yes.
So. Well, I think we're just about here at the end of the hour. So anything else you want to bring up here in our little post show, or?
No, I think I would like to thank you for inviting me on. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's very different from from the way I usually do things. So that's been. I've got to admit that there was a certain element of imposter syndrome before I started. Oh, am I going to keep on top of the discussion? But I've thoroughly enjoyed doing it. It's been good fun. And just thank you to everybody who's been listening and contributing.
Yeah, well, thank you for being on the show. Like I said, this has been an absolute thrill. You've been somebody I've wanted on for a while, and I'm glad we could meet virtually a couple weeks ago, and I'm glad we could actually have you on tonight to fill in for Blake. So you're always welcome on the show. I know it's a little late for you, but you're always welcome on if you want to sit and chat with us. And for everyone listening and watching, thank you. We don't really do like a sign off for the post show, but yeah. So check out Barry's podcast. It's awesome. He does a lot of interviews and with some awesome people too. So check his podcast out. Like I said, the description will be in wherever you're watching. It should be there. So cool. All right, Barry. Well, you should go get some sleep.
Yeah, I'm going to go to bed now. I'm done. So,
All right.
cool. I shall catch up with you again soon.
All right. Talk to you soon.